Welcome to Trek Trav. I am Trav and this is the Star Trek Generations review just for you. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe. If you haven't seen Star Trek Generations, it's quite old, so maybe go and watch it, come back and let's get into this review. So Star Trek Generations was my first Star Trek movie. I hadn't seen any of the original movies. I hadn't seen any of TOS. I was really like, oh my God, they're doing a Star Trek movie. I was genuinely, amazingly excited at this film. I knew of Kirk. I don't know how, but I remember seeing it. I would have been about 9 or 10 at the time when I saw this film. And I went into it going, oh, I know who that is. I think it was because actually, and I'm digressing, I did see one episode of TOS, and that was City on the Edge of Forever. That was my first episode of TOS, so it would have been around that time. Watching this film was like a dream come true for me, in that it was a Star Trek, The Next Generation movie with my favorite crew, my favorite captain, and it was the same ship, but it was in a movie, and they don't do a lot of like TV shows to movies anymore. And I'd really like to see them do that again, especially with Star Trek. But in terms of this movie, we got William Shatner, we got Walter Koenig, and we got James Doohan reprising their roles as Kirk, Chekhov, and Scotty aboard the Enterprise B. The first thing I noticed, and I've definitely noticed this more as I got older, is that it's very clear that Scotty and Chekhov were stand-ins for Spock and Bones.
Finding retirement a little lonely, are we?
You know, I'm glad you're an engineer. With tact like that, you'd make a lousy psychiatrist.
Even their dialogue, they barely changed the dialogue for these two characters in the beginning of the film. It's nice seeing them. I know under contract, they had to only have William Shatner in like the first 10 minutes and the last 20 minutes. It was an interesting way to sort of pass the torch on. We get introduced to the concept of the Nexus, which is an energy ribbon that you go into and it gives you everything you desire. It's kind of like heaven in a ribbon. Whoopi Goldberg is kind of the bridge between the classic era films and the Next Generation. She's an El-Aurian. We also get introduced to our bad guy Soren, played by Malcolm McDowell. He is also an El-Aurian. And we see that they're very, very intensely wanting to go back to this energy ribbon. And it's a really good sort of setup. And we get the first death in this film, supposed death, of Captain James T. Kirk. Now, if you'd seen the trailer at the time, you would know that James T. Kirk comes back and he's with Picard at the very, very end. Spoilers. But as a kid, I don't remember sort of making that connection. I don't think I saw the trailers. I think I saw the posters outside the cinema. Then we cut to our Enterprise D crew on a sailing ship, and they're all celebrating Worf's promotion, and it's a fun sort of play on, you're meant to go to the future, but it's actually an old sailing ship on the holodeck. All of the crew look fantastic in these naval gear. Instantly gives the feeling of a movie with the actual sailing ship, the same sailing ship they used for Pirates of the Caribbean for the Black Pearl. And I didn't know this till later. That's trivia that's locked in my head for no apparent reason. Picard gets a message of which we find out that Robert and Renee died. Now, if you've watched any of my other reviews, particularly First Contact or anything talking about the best of both worlds, Family was my favorite episode of TNG. It's always been my favorite episode of TNG because of the heartfelt emotion behind it. In that episode, we are introduced to Robert and Renee, Picard's brother and his nephew. And the saddest part about it is that they killed off these characters essentially to make Picard question his own existence. And the saddest part is it's a weird, misfunction of the plot. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And then we get him looking through photographs and he cries to Deanna about how he's lost them, that sense of loss, that sense that his family line is not continuing, the fact that his brother is dead, his nephew is dead, his nephew who he was like, this is me as a kid. And then we see photos in the photo book, and this is my first pet peeve, and I was like this as a kid. It had been 3 years since that TNG family episode. They didn't even get the original actors back. They've got an old dude and a young kid who look nothing like the originals. And I get that they only wanted them in for photos. They only wanted, I think Renee comes back in later on. But just try and get the same actors or get a similar actor. If that actor's passed away, like try and... It would have felt a lot more to me if Picard was crying over pictures of these actual characters we were close to. But the premise of the story is essentially Soren's come. Soren is hell-bent on getting back to the Nexus, the energy ribbon. And he does that by moving the Nexus's flight path so it coincides with hitting a planet. We get an introduction of the Klingons as the bad guy, which made no sense to me at the time. And I even remember as a kid going, why the Klingons? I hated the Klingons as a kid. Like, they're just boring for me as a kid. As an adult, not so much. And we get introduced to this... we get introduced to the Lursa and Bator from the series, so that's good. We've got some reference to the series. And they are promptly killed off by the end of the film. They're virtually nothing but transport for Soren. There's a really cool battle scene between the Klingon bird of prey and the Enterprise D. We get the Enterprise D crashing. We get Soren going into the Nexus. We get Picard going into the Nexus. The scene with... I'll talk about aesthetics after this. Picard meets Captain Kirk. They have a brief discussion about how he's an action hero and how they're on the Enterprise and how amazing it is. And he convinces Kirk to come back and help him stop Soren. Of which they do. And we lose the Enterprise in the process. The Saucer section crashed before because of the bird of prey. And it still crashes this time. So we lose the Enterprise D. Which is hands down in all of the many Star Trek films, the only ship where I've gone, oh my god, why the hell did you do that? Let's talk about the aesthetics of the film. The sets from the TV show are of a different level to a movie set. But I will tell you one thing, the Enterprise D interiors have never looked better. The source lighting that they used for the Armagosa star and having the star in the windows of the ship, the lighting, this film has a lot of oranges and like when the star goes supernova, there's reaction lighting within the ship. It gives us a sense of connectivity between the outside of the ship and the inside of the ship, and the whole interior looks fantastic. The bridge has these new computers around the edge, giving probably a bit more like the classic Enterprise. And it has these things, and I'm like, man, this bridge looks great. The three chairs are on steps. The three center chairs, the captain's chair, the commander's, and Deanna's, are on steps. The whole bridge looks great. The uniforms, they switched to the color on the top, which was a late change because they had originally designed uniforms that did not work. And so they switched to the DS9 uniforms. You can tell this by the fact that half of the officers are wearing uniforms that don't fit them. LeVar Burton's got arms that extend past his hands, and Jonathan Frakes has got arms that go halfway up his arm on the costumes. But they just really suit this movie. It gives it a sense that this is a movie changing the costumes up. The Enterprise D, there is a few reuses of, there's a shot from Star Trek 6, and there's also a shot of the Enterprise D going to warp from the TV show, which don't really hold up comparatively. But the model work in this, the sun's exploding looks fantastic. The planet exploding looks fantastic. The Enterprise D crashing into the planet, if you've watched the special features on the DVD, it is an amazing feat of engineering that they did in terms of crashing that into there. Like, all of these are practical effects. They look fantastic. The D's source section looks a bit blue, but I don't mind. It looks freaking fantastic in that scene. Having William Shatner and Picard come together is brilliant. I know the original idea was they wanted them to fight, but there was no way to work that out with the time and everything like that, so they went for this motif. I think, personally, Patrick Stewart and William Shatner play really well off each other. There's a charm within their relationship, even though it's very, very brief. Having William Shatner back is a good idea. I think, and to be fair, I actually think that Kirk dying in this film is perfect. I think a lot of fans were pissed off, but I think that having William Shatner continuously be around to just be around. We've already had Scotty, we've already had Leonard Nimoy in the TNG series. We didn't need another original series character to be saved from death. And Kirk and William Shatner agreed to this death, and he's had a few issues with how he's underrepresented with Star Trek recently. He died in Star Trek Generations, released in 1994, 20 years ago. His character hasn't come back to life. He hasn't been resurrected. We got a brief shot of his body in a Section 31 facility in Star Trek Picard Season 3. He's dead. And if they bring him back, it will just take away from that death. And I think that's fantastic. I think killing your central character in this film and allowing the TNG cast to move on is brilliant. In terms of Patrick Stewart's always on his game. Jonathan Frakes is, Jonathan Frakes is really good. I think Marina Sirtis crashing the Enterprise is sadly good. I know she hates it, but it's good. I think LeVar Burton's good. I think the whole Data and motion chip thing was a bit of a misstep because they tried to make him funny and quirky and he wasn't. Geordi getting kidnapped was a bit of a, let's put Geordi getting, I think Geordi's been kidnapped like 30 million times in the series. Overall, the story is about time, and it's about time catching up with you and death and how you got to make the most of the moment. Picard at the beginning is broken because he's lost some of his family. Soren is broken because he lost his family to the Borg. Soren wants to get back to the Nexus. Picard, while in the Nexus, is tempted by these visions of family and his nephew being alive. This is about reality versus fantasy. And if you fall into those fantasy, then reality suffers. And that is what this is about. And the amazing themes, because Patrick Stewart and Captain Picard's themes have always been a bit about time, because he's an older captain. At this time, he was quite young. But this one very much played into it. Having Whoopi Goldberg there and having it based around the Elorians, amazing. Having Whoopi Goldberg in anything was amazing, to be fair. And Malcolm McDowell plays a really sinister bad guy, a bit of a ranting standard villain, but really good. Lurch and Brator are a nice addition, although to be honest, they could have not been there and we could have had a random person show up. We got a reuse of the Klingon sets for the Klingon ship, reuse of the Klingon model. This film felt a little bit like it was done on the cheap to get a movie out as quickly as they could after TNG. And I think that might be the case. The biggest mistake was destroying the Enterprise D, which should have been in the movies right up till Nemesis. The Enterprise D was a fantastic ship, my personal favorite. If you have a problem with that, write it in the comments. But the Enterprise D should have been in the TNG movies. There was no reason why the Enterprise D couldn't be into it. I think the E is an okay ship. I just think the D was better. And in terms of story, this film did okay at the box office, obviously enough to get 3 sequels from it. It was a really fun film, and I remember the music. Dennis McCarthy has only done one Star Trek film, but his theme in that music, the theme for Generations, is fantastic. It really holds up. It's got some good notes. It's funny because Jerry Goldsmith is sort of lauded as the Star Trek composer, but Dennis McCarthy nailed this film. He got everything right. He would be third on my list of composers for Star Trek. Actually, that's a lie. He would still be last. I'm just thinking about the composers. He'd still be last. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, what did you think about Star Trek Generations? Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Come back soon for Star Trek Enterprise. I am getting on it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Have a great weekend.